Hi, and welcome to episode 4 of the Emotionally Challenged podcast. And I am your host and empowerment coach, Nikole Seals. And I want to welcome you to the video version of this show. Every now and then I do like to mix it up a little bit and do a video version so we can have some videos on YouTube and you can check out my coaching there. Today we're gonna be exploring negative self-talk, what I'm calling our inner critic, right? So it's that voice inside of our heads that is really critical of our behavior, our performance, our identity, our contribution, right? Just everything about ourselves, it's got something to say. And what I want to do is I first of all just want to help you to really identify what negative self-talk is and how it shows up in our internal dialogue, because most of the time we don't even realize that it's happening. So a good way to describe self-talk, just self-talk in general, is let's do it this way. As humans, we perceive this idea of self, and there's a voice inside of our head that we call the self, and that self engages in a dialogue. And that voice, that inner voice that we have, it talks to us, it talks with us, and sometimes it talks at us. And so this is what we refer to as the inner voice or self-talk or the inner dialogue. And this serves us a great purpose because what it helps us to do is it shapes our perception. It helps us to develop our beliefs. It impacts our emotions. It helps us to determine how we want to engage with others. So it's vitally important. And the really crucial thing to understand about self-talk is that it can take on the tone of being positive, and it can also take on the tone of being negative. Now, some people tend to feel like that's out of our control, that we don't necessarily have any control over which tone it takes, that's based on our external environment, right? It's our external environment that dictates that. And that's actually pretty inaccurate. We have a choice in the matter, and we can choose to have a positive perspective and a positive tone with our self-talk, or we can have a negative perspective and a negative tone with our self-talk. Now, we're going to talk a little bit later about why that's so incredibly difficult and why it feels like it's out of our control. But for now, I want you to just keep in mind that self-talk can be both positive and negative. Now, positive self-talk can have this amazing influence over your entire body. So if we talked about it influencing our moods, it can influence your mood to be more positive. If we talked about it influencing our behavior, we would then engage in positive behaviors. And when we talk about perspective, when we take on a positive tone with our self-talk, we then start to see the world with a more positive light, right? We have this positive filter on what we see, and we start really recognizing the good things in our world. Now, in the same way that can happen with positive self-talk, that can happen with negative self-talk. So if we have a negative tone, if that inner critic in us really has a strong voice and it's talking at us and it's telling us how we feel, right? It's influencing our mood. It's dictating our behaviors. It's looking at the external world and it's finding all of the negatives in that external world. Now, negative self-talk can be incredibly powerful, and what is something that all of us struggle with, myself, and I guarantee you people out there who are coaches and teachers and mentors and business owners and CEOs and leaders, everybody struggles with negative self-talk. And that's because we are all vulnerable creatures, right? It's in those moments of vulnerability that voice can be even stronger and louder. It's when it typically rises up, right? When we're fearful, when we're vulnerable, when we're afraid, when we're questioning. That's usually when that voice can get pretty loud. So to give you an example of negative self-talk, I'm going to share with you a personal story that happened to me some years ago, but I do love sharing this story with people because it's such a great example of how your negative self-talk can take you to a place that you may not have even intended on, but it almost happens on autopilot. It's just like an automatic drive in you, and we really struggle to stop it, right? Sometimes we even struggle to acknowledge that it's happening. So for me, this happened years ago when I was doing social work and I was done. I was really reaching a place of burnout with social work and was looking for a new working experience and had decided that I was applying for a job as a court mediator. And it still was within the same field, and I knew many people that worked over at court, so it was something that I was really interested in. I thought it's so much like the work I already do that it should pretty much be a shoo-in. So I went ahead, I felt pretty prepared. I went ahead to the interview and met with it was a panel interview, so there were going to be 3 people who were interviewing me. They were all management positions, so it's slightly intimidating, but I'm not going to lie to you, I was feeling myself. And I went in totally confident and realizing that this is just an extension of the work that I already do, so I got this. So I go in, we have the interview, and it actually goes really well. I'm feeling really good about it. And that was only the first part. What I soon learned was that there was a second part of the interview that was actually a mock mediation. So if you don't know much about mediation in family court, the role of the mediator is to really manage conflicts, whether it's divorce or it's custody. It's to manage conflicts between the parties and to find some kind of mutual ground and a mutual agreement between parties. So basically, it's the equivalent of you seeing 2 people arguing on the street and you step in and you try to calm the argument. That's essentially what the job is, but in a courthouse. So I was totally unprepared for this mock mediation, but I'm flexible and game, so I just rolled with it. And 2 of the managers were sitting across from me, and they were acting as a married couple. And essentially, what they did is they engaged in a fight in this interview, and my role was to mediate it and talk my way through and demonstrate my skills. Everything that I claimed to be, I had to actually demonstrate it to them. There were a few moments of panic, but once I found my rhythm, I just was on the job. I was back, working with my clients, and honestly, like it went really, really smooth. And I again was feeling myself at the end of the interview. So we finished it up, and they were just smiling, and they seemed really impressed. And I was in a really good mood because I just was feeling really proud of my performance at the time. And we all stood up, and they, extended their hand to shake mine because the interview was over and I was getting ready to leave. And they go out to shake my hand, and I don't know why, to this day, this was so many years ago, but to this day, I have no idea why I responded the way that I did. And I actually reached out and I hugged them. Well, so the first person who went to shake my hand, I reached out and I hugged them. And as I'm in the hug, I'm in the middle of the embrace, and I'm already regretting it. Like, I'm mid-embrace and I have deep regret in my soul at the time. And here's the crazy part, right? There's 3 people in there, and I'm hugging the first one. And although I know it's bad and I should not be doing this is so inappropriate to be doing in an interview, I had to stay committed to it because I couldn't just hug one and then not hug the other 2 because that would seem really weird. So I proceeded to hug everybody in the room. I walked out of that building, got in my car, and the internal dialogue that proceeded to play on a loop in my head went basically something like this. You are an idiot. I cannot believe you just did that. You absolutely blew it. So much for getting this job as a mediator. Way to go, Nikole. I can't believe you just went in there and mugged it up. You were doing so good, but you had to go and hug somebody, right? And this just went on my whole drive home. I couldn't stop it. I was so disappointed by myself. By the time I got home, I had totally beat up on myself. And then that moved me into this really disappointed, dark place where I tapped in to my other fears, to my other disappointments. And this is how our brain works, right? No one really talks to us or explains how our brain Well, I think because we're just learning this information now, right? This is really new in neuroscience, but our brain is geared towards having an experience and then finding other experiences that match it in our memory, right? So anytime we're experiencing something that's causing us to feel scared or uncertain, we reflect on the other times in our lives where we feel scared and uncertain. And so all of those emotions come flooding back up. Well, this is exactly what happened. Every time I felt disappointed or blown an interview or not risen to the occasion or did well and then dropped the ball at the 3-yard line, all of that came back up. And I started thinking about past times that I blew it. And then that led me to a place where I was like, you're never going to get out of this job that you currently have. You're going to be miserable and you're going to have to stick with it. And you're just going to end up getting yourself sick from all of this stress. I can't even believe I have to get up and go to work tomorrow morning. And I got deeply depressed over it. And I really struggled to get up the next morning and to go into my current job and go sit at my desk. And I just struggled to work that day. I was really short with people, didn't have a whole lot of interaction, really kept to myself. I was still feeling like the residue of the internal conversation that I had had with myself the day before. And it stayed with me. Like my mood was one of disappointment and depression and shame. And everything that I saw in my external world, I just saw negativity. So this went on till about 3:30 in the afternoon, and I got a phone call, and it ended up being the interviewer, the one who had interviewed me for the job. She was actually the director of in this department over at court, and I knew it. I was like, great, here comes the call. Well, let's get it over with. Let's end it now so I don't have to worry about it anymore. And she said, you know what, Nikole, we thought you were fantastic. And we would love to have you come back for the final interview. And we were hoping you'd be able to make it in tomorrow. And I'm sitting on the phone and I'm like, what? I was like, were you the one I hugged yesterday? I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. And I just remember I don't really remember the conversation. We talked a little bit more and then I hung up and I sat there for a minute, and the first thing that came to my mind is, I went through all of that for nothing. I tortured myself for absolutely no reason. And I share that story with you because that is part of our nature, right? I know as I'm telling you this, you are reflecting on a similar experience that you've had where you have just let yourself go down the rabbit hole. And that's what negative self-talk can do. Positive self-talk can uplift us. It can take us to a place where we become excited about life, right? We start getting more creative. We start seeing more possibilities. It becomes infectious, right? Then we start attracting more positive people into our lives. Negative self-talk has that same power, but to do just the opposite. It has a power to take you to the places where it's really hard to recover, where you feel so low that it requires a tremendous amount of energy to pull yourself out of that place. So that's why we're having conversations about negative self-talk. I think it's an important topic for us to be having. Unfortunately, this is not something that's ever taught to us in schools. We don't have a course on emotional intelligence. We don't have a course on linguistics where we talk about the power of words. And what I'm hoping to do with this show and what I'm hoping to do with my work is to get people educated and to start having more dialogues about the simple things that we can be doing in life to turn our lives around. Word choices, the words that we choose are so important. Words matter. Words determine what our internal dialogue is going to be. So we're going to have way more conversations about self-talk. We're going to talk about the positives. We're going to talk about the negatives. But I do encourage you to join me for the next podcast episode where I'm going to be talking about the different types of negative self-talk behavioral patterns, right? We do this so often, it's so common that there's a psychological term for the patterns that we use and we engage in regularly that we're actually totally unaware of. So be sure to join me for the next episode where we'll dive deep into that conversation. And if you want more information on negative self-talk, if you are already aware that it's something that you need to work on, make sure that you go to NikoleSeals.com. I have great blog posts over there. I have other videos that you can watch to help you. If you're interested in really doing the work and you're ready to make things happen and to make a change, please make sure to check out my programs and my self-help tools, which are really basic, practical tools that you can use to start baby stepping your way to having better, stronger, more powerful, more empowered conversations with yourself. So be sure to go check it out over at NikoleSeals.com. And subscribe to the show. If you're liking the show, make sure to share it and make it your favorite. And subscribe to my newsletter so that you can get some insights into upcoming shows. And I want to make sure I also invite you to be brave and do something exciting if you want to go ahead and take a leap into making some change. I offer for the podcast here for people to come on and have a coaching session with me. And you can do it anonymously. You don't have to use your real name. But what it does is it gives me the opportunity to help you. And at the same time, I can air that on the show and we can help a lot of people together. So reach out to me at my email. Go to my website, NikoleSeals.com. Go to the contact page. You can reach out to me there or directly at hello@NikoleSeals.com and let me know if you'd like to come onto the show.